with you today, doing a little new format. As you can see, I'm broadcasting this live, but I'm editing the video because I want to include some important information, and because this is about 5G and wireless technology, I don't use Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff, and this is just a normal camera, so it's not like I'm going to broadcast this directly anyway, but I'm broadcasting it live because I want you to interact, and I want your feelings about this, your opinions, what you're experiencing on a local level. So today I am going to share some important things, a lot of which I'm taking from this document, which is from Dr. Martin Pall, and I'm going to link this in the description here so you can access this document also. It's deep. It's like 90 pages, and I'm going to share some of the real important parts about it. And also I'm going to share some other little tidbits along the way so that you can kind of get a good feeling on the truth of what's going on. This is called 5G, Great Risk for EU, US International Health, Compelling Evidence for 8 distinct types of great harm caused by electromagnetic field exposure and the mechanisms that cause them. And Dr. Martin Pall is the guy we had locally. He's a biochemist from Washington State University. We had him here in Eugene last October. If you haven't seen it, I'll also be linking in the description the video where you can watch the archive of that event as well, because he shares some very important stuff. You can hear it right from him as well, but I'm going to summarize it in kind of a more layperson's viewpoint so you can kind of understand what he talks about the voltage gate and stuff like that.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. We've heard from a lot of witnesses from you today and others previously about the very important potential of 5G technology. It promises to bring us a new era of connectivity with internet speeds as much as 5 times faster than what we have today, with much lower latency, and that's all a good thing. But 5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications to those additional sites that are likely to be located close to homes, schools, workplaces, and closer to the ground?
Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut, and in a recent U.S. Senate hearing, which they called Winning the Race to 5G.
So in December of 2018, I sent a letter to FCC Commissioner Carr asking him to cite for me recent scientific studies demonstrating the safety of this technology. What research has been done, where has it been published and compiled? He has essentially failed to do so, and just echoed the general statements of the FDA, which shares regulatory responsibility for cell phones with the FCC. If you go to the FDA website, pretty unsatisfactory. There basically is a cursory and superficial citation to existing scientific data saying, quote, the FDA has urged the cell phone industry to take a number of steps, including support additional research on possible biological effects of radio frequency fields for the type of signal emitted by cell phones. I believe that Americans deserve to know what the health effects are, not to prejudge what scientific studies may show. And they deserve also a commitment to do the research on outstanding questions. So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Berry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
But no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, I want to add something to the record in light of what Senator Blumenthal raised, just so we can have a complete record. I am told the National Cancer Institute has determined that, quote, although many studies have examined the potential health effects of non-ionizing radiation from radar, microwave ovens, cell phones, and other sources, there is currently no consistent evidence that non-ionizing radiation increases cancer risk, unquote. And that is a quote from the National Cancer Institute, and I would be happy to have other information submitted to members of the committee.
So you've probably already heard a bunch of stuff about 5G, and it's getting kind of hard to sort out the fact from the speculative. We hear about these 20,000 satellites, tens of millions of antennas that are going to be installed just about every street corner, every few houses even. There's a lot to support some of those claims, and we'll see how long it takes them to actually put into low Earth orbit all these satellites and how that's part of this plan if they actually get away with this crazy plan. The bottom line is that these frequencies, they don't travel as far. They're so well absorbed by all materials, whether it's a living material or a dead material, that they need all sorts of antennas everywhere in order to make the system work. But before we get too far into 5G technology, one thing that's really important to understand is that we're talking about pulsed EMF, not continuous. That's a big distinction. It's something that the industry tries to hide, tries to point at studies that are not relating to pulsed EMF and actually don't really matter. They don't prove anything unless it's actually referring to pulsed EMF. So why are the pulses so important? That is a really important question, because the pulses are what make up the information pattern. Let's say, for example, you're watching this video on a mobile phone. What's going on is that there is a pulse, an information pattern, a very complex information pattern, which is carried on the signal. That makes up this video. When that pulse is decrypted, it's turned into this video that you're watching right now. The reason that that's so important is that those information patterns get very complex, and the more complex the information pattern, the harder it is on biological systems to interpret And just to compensate for, that's one of the reasons this technology is so problematic. And that's one of the reasons that we really have to pay attention to the studies that we look at and make sure that they're actually referring to pulsed technology, and that the pulse is actually simulating the real type of technology that is going to be used once 5G is actually rolled out. So we know that pulse signals are more biologically active, but what's really going on inside the cells? That's something that Dr. Martin Pall has explored extensively. It comes down to the voltage gate, or the voltage sensor in the cellular membranes, and that's what's getting played with the electrical force that these EMFs are putting on the cell membranes. So that electrical force is pushing on this voltage sensor and actually allowing more calcium ions into the cell. This causes a lot of downstream problems, but the most simple thing to understand is that these voltage gates, these voltage control mechanisms, are being overloaded by electrical forces. It's causing more ions of calcium to flow into the cells. So the voltage sensor is this highly sensitive mechanism in your cellular membranes, which is controlling the input of ions of calcium, among other things, into your cells. It's being overloaded by these forces, by these electrical forces, and it's very, very sensitive. These are called voltage-gated calcium channels. That's the effect that's being overridden by all sorts of EMFs, whether it's 5G or one of the previous generations, 4G or 3G. In addition, 5G is getting into higher frequency ranges, and that's so, as I said, they can pack more data, because we're talking frequencies between 30 and 300 gigahertz, very high frequencies, and more pulses. Because that's the thing, is that as you get into the higher frequency range, more pulses can be carried on the signal. And that's the whole point of it. The whole point is to be able to support more and more data in all this Internet of Things, smart homes, smart appliances, driverless cars, all kinds of technologies. This is not just for faster wireless technology, faster downloads on phones. That's a selling point that the industry is using to sell you on this technology, but that's not really what this is about. Another thing you may or may not have heard about regarding 5G is what's called phased array antennas. I remember first hearing about this many years ago when a lot of the information was first coming out about HAARP, which is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Involved an antenna array, basically a whole field of antennas up in Alaska. These antennas were designed to use this phased array method, which sequences the transmission to the various antennas in the array in a way that it concentrates the power. It's like creating a funnel effect on the power output from many antennas, concentrating the power to a smaller pinpoint area. And they did this to influence the ionosphere, which is the charged upper layer of the atmosphere. And this same type of technology, phased array antennas, are capable with 5G technology, and it seems that that's the way they can create these beam effects with the technology and create a concentrated, faster download effects through these beams of 5G energy. And this is really scary, because if you get caught in one of those beams, then you're getting impacted by a lot more power than anywhere else around it. That's one of the problems. So to summarize, what we're talking about is millimeter waves. These are not microwaves. These are higher frequencies than microwaves. These have not been tested through any kind of human safety testing. It's kind of crazy when you really look at it, because the millimeter waves, the only real testing that's been done is regarding continuous wave, not pulsed. And This is clearly involving a lot of pulse, a lot of information. That's the whole point of it, is to stack more information in these new bandwidths. It's definitely not something we want to support. Bottom line is safety is first, and we need to support proper launching of any kind of technology, and safety should be the first evaluation. So why are they using phased array antennas then? The millimeter waves that they're using with the 5G technology don't penetrate so far. So in order to increase penetration, they're utilizing this concept of phased array antennas. This is just to increase absorption. And that brings us to an important point. Like I mentioned, millimeter waves have really not been safety tested when it comes to pulsed millimeter waves. The only testing that's been researched, and it's very minimal, is continuous wave millimeter waves. With that, what was discovered is not only VGCC, voltage gated calcium channel activation, but also activation of potassium channels. This is causing a lot of problems, and that's before we even introduce the pulse. This idea of pulsed millimeter waves and phased array antennas is really, really something to be concerned about. Now, another thing you might hear is that only the first 1 to 2 millimeters of the skin are affected by the frequencies from 5G and wireless technology in general. You know, that's an important question, and it's really important when you consider other animals and other living organisms, plants as well, because organisms that have a higher surface area to volume ratio are then going to be more affected. And this is something Dr. Martin Pall points out very astutely. But the bottom line, it's never been proven that these frequencies are only affecting the surface layer. He also points out a study that showed that pregnant cows grazing on lands that were close to a cell transmitter or a cell tower had much higher outcomes in their newborn calves that had cataracts. So graze near a cell tower and the newborn that is deep within that pregnant cow is going to have higher outcomes of cataracts than the cows that graze far from the cell tower. That was a well-done study. It points out that these waves are penetrating deep within the tissue of large organisms. We know that these frequencies and these fields are affecting the outer layer of the skin much more predominantly with the electric fields. Yet there are effects going on deep within the organism. How is this happening? Dr. Martin Pall points out some interesting theories on this. We know that the magnetic field component of these fields has deep penetration. Even if the electric field has more of a surface effect, the magnetic field is penetrating deep within the tissue and actually will regenerate the electric field of the same frequency and same pulse rate within the tissue based on the interaction with the charged particles, charged molecules in the cellular structure. That's how, especially these aqueous bodies, the organs that have more moisture content, are going to be more affected. So this means the eyes are going to be much more sensitive, the kidneys are going to be much more sensitive. That's why he theorizes that we may have more problems with eyes. This is an example that points towards this study that was done on the cows that were grazing with the calves that had much higher levels of cataracts in their newborn. Eye problems, cataracts, macular degeneration, problems that relate to the vitreous humor of the eyes, the kidneys because of the moisture content, both blood and urine in the kidneys, a lot of fluid in the kidneys, thereby being a center of kind of a regenerative electrical fields. from these effects. So I encourage you to get involved, see what's going on in your local community opposing 5G. Most likely there are people and community groups already working on this issue because it's happening all over the world. Get involved. That's what I've been doing. We're doing our best to push against this, force these industries to do the right thing, even though they seem to be determined not to. So if the lowered birth rates aren't enough that we're already getting from 4G and previous technologies, the future could be even worse. We could see really high rates of spontaneous abortion. We could see even higher rates of autism. There's a lot of things that can be on the horizon for this if we don't really step up and act and really take notice of what's going on with this kind of technology. 5GSpaceAppeal.org site has an international appeal against 5G. So I encourage you to go up there and sign that appeal, that international appeal to oppose 5G as a war against humanity, essentially. They've done a great job of articulating this appeal. So go check that out. You've heard a lot of different angles on this technology, and I want to present a different one because I think it's an important aspect to keep in mind. Both law enforcement and the military have largely abandoned a very similar technology called active denial system, which was used for crowd control because of health and safety concerns. It's a technology that was designed to literally heat the outer layer of the skin using millimeter waves and literally causes people to flee instantly because they feel like their skin is on fire. And this is the kind of technology that's being proposed to be used throughout the general public, close to people's homes, and it's like other people have stated, it's likely to cause a lot of litigation because of the safety concerns. There have been no health and safety testing on pulsed millimeter waves. When asked this in the literature, the responses that are quoted usually quote millimeter wave technology that is not pulsed. All of 5G technology uses pulsed millimeter waves, and the pulses are very important because they are the information that's being carried on the millimeter wave carrier wave. Without the pulse, the technology doesn't work. It doesn't carry a signal. All of it is pulsed millimeter wave technology. That's why I urge you to enact this emergency moratorium and also join in this resolution that Portland is taking part in to stop the 5G rollout and stop any sites, including co-location and any small cell sites. So to sum up the 5G wireless controversy, there's been no safety testing, no health and safety testing on this technology. There's been huge disinformation campaigns promoted by the industry to sway public opinion about this. This is not about smartphones. This is not about faster download speeds. It's about supporting the infrastructure of the Internet of Things, smart homes, driverless cars, and other technologies like that, which require huge amounts of new bandwidth, which requires them to get onto this millimeter wave band. So what we've really all got to understand about 5G and what this is all about is that it's about data. It's about your data, your privacy. It's about this whole Internet of Things and smart homes, and it's kind of the next step of this smart metering infrastructure where smart appliances are all tied in. And the bottom line is that the current wireless technology has just about maxed out the bandwidth of the data that can be transmitted through it. So now they want to get up into these higher frequencies regardless of the health implications in order to pack more data on those signals, and they need to get up into this higher frequency range, into the millimeter wave bandwidth in order to do that. It's clear that there's major red flags with the health and safety implications of this, never mind the privacy implications of gathering all this data about your private activities, packing it onto the wireless waves and sending it to the highest bidder that wants to pay for advertising or for whatever they feel fit to use the data about what you're doing. So that's what 5G is. They're already overstepping their bounds as far as installing these transmitters that are equipped for the 5G technology without getting proper notification to the neighborhoods and through the normal city permitting methods that's going on here in the community where I live. And this is something that we all really need to step up, get involved, really say no. We need to take the precautionary principle here, put a moratorium on the installation, and before they turn on this technology, we really need to stop it. You know, a lot of people can relate to this. Here I am in the middle of a snowstorm here. We get them pretty rarely where I live, but we've got a power outage here right now. At this time when there's a power outage, it's like things get really quiet. I don't know about you, but I sure can think a lot clearer when there's no power disruption and waves circling around my brain. So anyway, that's 5G for you. Stand up and let's stop this.